Welcome back to your corruption scorecard here on ENCA. Before the break, we had Professor Thuli Madonsela trying to take us through the reasoning behind establishing a commission of inquiry when we all know that at the end of it all, there's still going to be the need for prosecutorial processes to unfold. So let's go back to her. We lost connection with her a bit earlier on. Prof, you were explaining why not go the direct route, route one, as it were, of going straight for prosecution. Why the Commission of Inquiry?
The Commission of Inquiry was for justice, fairness and completeness. Firstly, some of the allegations had not been investigated conclusively and the accused persons had not given us their side of the story. Even though they played hide and seek, it seemed to be fair, given the importance of this matter, to give them a second bite. President Zuma being one of those who didn't take the opportunity to speak to me, the Commission of Inquiry was to give them this opportunity. Also, the complexity of this matter, I thought that it was better handled by a Commission of Inquiry rather than the prosecution, and I think I was right, just given what has come out of the Commission of Inquiry.
Erin, your sense of it all? I mean, we're talking now at a point where the Commission, in terms of costs of running it, is well over 700 million rand, and our prediction is certainly that it will surpass the 1 billion rand mark. Much more expensive than the Siriti Commission of Inquiry, but I suppose there's really no basis for comparison given the lack of rigor of the Siriti Commission as opposed to what is transpiring now. But I still get frustrated, though, Erin, when I see sometimes things that are, to me, they seem like really basic issues. Issues like battling with page numbering, where you can spend a good 5 minutes with Justice Ray Zondo trying to figure out what system of page numbering the evidence leader is using today compared to the one that was used the day before. Issues like getting documents to witnesses in time for them to prepare, where people are told, oh, we'll give you an hour to just read through that statement and then come back and respond. That doesn't put the Commission in a good light. Am I unnecessarily harsh in my assessment of the Commission?
I don't think so at all. And if you look at the price tag for the Commission and the stakes of its work, it's fair for the press to be rigorous in how it assesses what the Commission is doing. And certainly administrative issues have beleaguered the Commission since the very beginning. And in fact, at the beginning of this year, the first sitting of 2020, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo emphasizing that time is of the essence. And that's been a running theme. And there, Thulas, I do think the absence of interim reports on the Commission's work is a great problem, because if the Commission had filed interim reports, no matter how limited, because work streams are a bit, higgledy-piggledy, and we also need the response of implicated persons, those reports may have flagged some of the administrative issues early on and may too have sort of amplified and escalated the work of the Commission, which is now extended beyond the initial stipulated period in the State of Capture report 2 or 3 times. And so that March 2021 deadline is looming, and it's unlikely that some of these administrative issues will completely disappear before that deadline for the hearings. All
right, let me ask all three of you one question. The issue around charges, getting people in the dock and getting them to plead to a specific crime. Because, in our criminal code, you won't find a crime called state capture. You will find corruption, fraud, money laundering, etc. Are you as frustrated as many South Africans are that we are not there? The idea, Erin, let me start with you, at some point was that while all of this is happening, this public cleansing, confessional time for the nation, while that was happening, we were going to be seeing people standing before a judge, answering questions. Are you as frustrated that this is not really happening at the pace and scale we would have expected?
My inkling to us is that I'm as frustrated, if not more, having sat through hours and hours of testimony over the last 2 odd years. And I think, generally speaking, South Africa, pre and post-democracy, has a pretty shoddy record when it comes to commissions of inquiry. So, of course, the stakes here are really high. There's certainly an appetite among certain civilians and South Africans for people standing before court. But the thing to us is that if you expect the commission to land people behind bars, you're really barking up the wrong tree. And in some ways, the commission, whether by design or accident, has become a political forum where we see ongoing disputes and kind of factional issues playing out.
All right, Erin, from you, let me take it to Ivor Chipkin. Same question. Are you as frustrated as some South Africans would be? I mean, some people would even be saying we could have used the 700 million rand to equip the prosecutorial investigative services. Hermione Cronje can certainly use some of that money.
Look, I mean, I think if your understanding of state capture is simply that it's a form of corruption, then I think there was no need for this commission of inquiry, or it should have been something much simpler. Its terms of reference, as the previous public protector mentioned, have been changed in the strangest ways. So the original terms of reference are pretty straightforward, clear areas of investigation, and that could have been done through the NPA later on. So I would agree with that, and I share that frustration. For me, though, the issue is slightly more complicated in that I think Erin Bates raised the point around the modus operandi, because I think that's where things get really, really interesting and move the conversation simply away from a question of criminality or corruption. What the modus operandi of state capture shows, around procurement, around the repurposing of institutions, shows huge gaps, contradictions, holes in the legislative, regulatory, institutional framework around government. What it opens up for is a huge conversation around government reform. We are not having that conversation. And as a matter of fact, the conversation around corruption gets in the way of that conversation. We're having that conversation around complicity of individuals at the expense of a much bigger conversation around the kinds of institutional reforms which are needed to prevent this from happening again. And I think that's what needs to be on the agenda. So if the Zondo Commission has any real value, and I agree that there's a question mark over that, if it has any real value, it will be in its ability to define a concrete, profound and meaningful agenda for public sector reform, and I worry that it's not doing that.
All right, and then throw the same question to you, Professor Thuli Madonsela. Many South Africans wondering, when do we get to see people attending trial at the, I don't know, the Gauteng division of the High Court, Pretoria, or, Johannesburg? Anything really will take it at this point.
Well, definitely I am frustrated like other people. Just firstly to say to Ivor, the original Commission of Inquiry, as prescribed in the State of Capture report, dealt with state capture. It didn't deal with ordinary corruption. In fact, it's the expanded terms of reference that have brought in ordinary corruption into state capture. Somebody, for example, who pays for food, who pays people for tenders with meals, etc. That's not necessarily state capture, in that that person has no power on who is appointed, who is removed from office, and who determines policies. And if they don't come up with the right policies, how do they get removed? So the original State Capture Commission was supposed to deal with state capture. It wasn't supposed to deal with all manner of corruption in the country. But it has done that, so we shouldn't moan the past. And in doing that, in dealing with other forms of corruption, it has told us that it's worse than we ever thought. And in that case, I was right then that it's giving us some kind of insight into how particularly the state procurement system has become rotten to the core, and the need, therefore, to reform it as speedily as possible. Whilst we also look at governance generally, because state capture, if there's anything that it destroyed, it was governance.
Erin, talk to me about the Investigative Directorate, Scorpions 2.0, as I like to call them, an investigative directorate within the National Prosecuting Authority to lead prosecution-led investigations. It sounds very familiar. We basically we tore down the building with those resolutions in 2007 coming out of the ANC conference, only to say we want to rebuild it again and give it a new name. Something significant significant happened, though, last month, the amendment of the regulations that now enables the, the people who work in the Commission of Inquiry to also work later on with the investigative bodies. How significant is that, that tweak in the regulations?
Well, certainly in my discussions with Advocate Hermione Cronje of the NPA on this very issue, she emphasized what clout it would give to her team, because what it means is that people who've worked in what I call the engine room of the Commission, under Terence Nombembe, the former Auditor General, these investigators have, with special expertise, worked in the engine room of the Commission to try and consolidate different sources of information, to verify things like hard drives and databases and so on. And so these people, once they conclude their work with the Commission, can now migrate over to the special unit at the NPA. And Cronje emphasized in a discussion with me at the beginning of August, so I think the regulations were actually changed around mid-July or so, she said that it's the institutional knowledge of those investigators who've sat with the Commission in that engine room for over 2 years, which will prove so useful to her. But Thulas, just quickly, the other thing she emphasizes that whereas the Commission has a wide net, it can go fishing with a wide net and get a hard drive and sort of sift through everything in it. She, sitting at the NPA building cases where you're accusing people, has to get very specific court orders about what she's going to find. So if the Commission has a big, wide fishing net, she has a tiny little fishing rod, and she has to argue for why she can look at a hard drive and what particular information she's seeking to prosecute something like corruption in the Freda Dairy project. And so this change is perhaps one of the most significant changes in the rules and regulations of the Commission.
Folks, I want to bring in the issue of the big Gs, the Gupta family. I don't know about you, Ivor, I'm getting the sense that, you know, if we are saying these were people who were almost like the head of this mafia family, if we were to liken it to a mafia family, initially we were focusing so much on the Guptas, their movements. I remember at one point, you know, tracking where are they now, what's happening. If you were to do a word cloud search right now, I imagine that the word Gupta doesn't really feature, except, of course, today in the testimony of Thulasizwe, who's been asked about that. But in terms of the narrative, they seem to have fallen below the radar. Do you understand what that is about?
I think it goes back to the point that the previous public protector was making, Thuli Madonsela, that the terms of reference of this commission of inquiry have drifted quite far away from the idea of state capture, which was really around a political project driven by a political elite, what we call the power elite, to capture key organs of the state and to use it for private or political purposes, of which the Gupta family were at the centre piece of that. What we argued in the Betrayal of the Promise report is that the Gupta family were empowered in the way they were because they functioned, if you like, as a kind of battering ram. They were the battering ram against white monopoly capital. Don't forget what they deployed. They deployed all sorts of extraordinary resources to support this political campaign. ANN7, a newspaper group. They provided huge amounts of financial resources for fighting political campaigns. They empowered a political faction within the ANC really to achieve supremacy. So it was within the understanding of state capture as a political phenomenon that the Guptas featured so strongly. If you understand it simply as a means of corruption, well, then they're just one corrupt family amongst so many other corrupt families.
Yeah, all right. I'm almost running out of time. Professor Thuli Madonsela, let me ask you about the complexity of the path going forward, right? Hermione Cronje also talking about a death of the skills that she needs in terms of tracking some of these transactions, the work that was done, for instance, around the Estina farm project. Well, you know, okay, let me not go there about the public protector's investigations there too. Let's leave that. But the complexities that money repurposed here at home, here in South Africa, ends up in multiple destinations, some of which are not really keen to open up the books of people who bank in those destinations. How complex is the process going forward, do you believe?
Well, the longer it takes, the more complex it becomes, as you know, that the longer it takes for investigating crime, and corruption is crime, and state capture is a special kind of crime, the longer it takes you to get on the footsteps of the corrupt people, the more complex the path becomes, because they can hide the money, they can destroy the very computers, etc. What we had hoped was that the computers would have been seized immediately, and bank records would have been seized immediately, cell phone records would have been. I still hope that was done. But everything that has been said and done, the State Capture Commission has done great work. Yes, it has cost us a fortune, but we have to ask ourselves about, if we hadn't spent this fortune, well, it's unfortunate that it is this amount of money, but if we hadn't spent money on this commission, would the state of South Africa hold? And if the state of South Africa does not hold, if democracy doesn't hold, would the fabric of society be holding now? And would it hold for the next 10 years, 20 years, etc.?
Last word to you, Erin Bates. There's a promise that we are going to see action in the coming days and weeks coming from the Investigative Directorate in the NPA. Should we hold our breath or should we not?
Thulas, if there's anything I've learned working in journalism over the last several years, it's that it's not worth holding your breath if you want to keep breathing. So we can hope for the best and plan for the worst. These cases are going to take a long time, and the more pragmatic one is about these sorts of things, I think the better.
All right, thank you so much. I've got to thank you, thank all three of you, Professor Thuli Madonsela, Erin Bates joining us also there in that conversation, and Ivor Chipkin. Thank you so much for your time and your insights here on the corruption scorecard. Stand by. In just a moment, Michael Marilia coming back to report on that poll that we are running on our website about how the state what you would like to see happening in terms of responding to state capture.